From years of anxiety to warrior and mentor, Bradley Robinson created the Anxiety Project to help you end your anxiety naturally. Let's mold the new you and let's end anxiety together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Anxiety Project podcast. Welcome to 302. Thanks for joining me, Brad Robinson, and we're exploring trauma today. We all have trauma to varying degrees. Trauma is something that elicits negative emotion. You generate, it's not even that you consciously generate, you unconsciously generate an image, a moment from your past, a movie from your past, and it sends out a sudden negative emotion. Sometimes trauma makes me freeze when I'm in the moment, right? I am doing something and I stop and I'm playing out this movie in my head, and then I push it away and I come back into the present wondering, man, that was like, not what was that? It more like, man, that's terrible. I don't want to bother with that. So today we're looking towards trauma, and I wanted to simplify trauma today, break it down very simply, and so you can take this information and heal from whatever's plaguing you. So I hope you enjoy this one. Now, like I said before, trauma, it ranges from an embarrassing moment you had in high school or at a party to something that you experienced like abuse, an accident, betrayal. And as Dr. Jordan Peterson points out, he says the trauma people have the hardest time overcoming, healing from, is malevolence, betrayal, abuse. And the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Because a person like me went out of their way to harm me, to destroy me. And it's hard for people to wrap their heads around that. Peterson also points out that in order to fully heal from that, you have to have a good understanding of good and evil and why someone actually winds up doing that and why you can be that person as well. So it's very, very complicated, but at the same time, you are building this understanding, because if that person can do it, that means you can do it. And putting yourself in their shoes is a great way to heal from the trauma, because you want to, the biggest thing about it is wondering and building resentment and bitterness over that person that did that horrible thing to you. And forgiveness is the result of understanding. We see this reflected in the most archetypal stories of our culture. The story of Christ is the worst thing happening to the person that least deserves it. We see that in Harry Potter as well. What's this image of the cross? Because we all hold this image, the point of maximal suffering, up as an ideal. And it's to look upon the image of suffering and to worship that, to continue to worship that. Now, it's pretty simple, really, to understand that. We're looking upon the thing that troubles us the most, how to transcend suffering, because to look upon something so intense like that, you will generate solutions, internal solutions to overcoming the fear of fear itself. And what's the ultimate fear? Well, it's certainly sometimes you hear people say it's death, but there's things way worse than that. It's pain, it's betrayal, it's, pain. Pain, it's terrible. Look upon it with curiosity, study it, and then you'll generate solutions to how one can transcend it. And the biblical stories, among other many great stories, reflect that, how one can transcend the suffering. Now, let us dive into complexes, which is a term coined by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. He valued direct inner experience, that we are mostly a well of unconscious processes that have more control over us than we think. The unconscious mind is like an ocean. That's what he's talking about. That's the symbolic representation of the unconscious. That's why the hero dives into the ocean, into the belly of the whale, or into some sort of you know, Atlantis or some sort of cave. And it's this representation of diving into the place forthrightly, knowing that, well, it could harm me, but there's something of value I can pull from it. And so the water is something you can fish from, right? Like you you cast a line and you can pull up something from the depths. It's your unconscious mind is that thing. I mean, you can pull up memories from the depths. And some of them are very terrifying and some of them we don't want to confront. So to journey down into the belly of the whale is exactly that notion, is in order to heal, the stories are telling us we have to venture into that darkness, and we can come up from the depths an enlightened person as a consequence. So he viewed the unconscious as a strong and stormy sea out of which consciousness emerges. Living in the unconscious were complexes, certain brain associations that are active with unresolved, unexamined emotion. He noticed that certain forces within us could cause us to respond to certain outside stimuli, and that once explored would unravel emotional significance and information to why this is the case. A complex is a magnet pulling our attention towards an intense feeling of negative emotion. Something in your environment can elicit this feeling, bringing about a memory, or it can be brought about voluntarily if you are inclined to explore and resolve it. It's like the golden snitch calling out to you. The golden snitch is exactly that. It's round chaos, because once caught, you can open it up and it will provide you with new information, which it does Harry later in the book series, which is so incredible. That's the symbol. And so these complexes have a life of their own. Again, the snitch is like that. It's flickering around. It's like random, right? It has a mind of its own, but you catch it and it'll give you something in return. It's the dragon hoarding the gold. The dragon always hoards gold. What's gold? Gold is information. And like Peterson says, puts you in formation towards your higher self. It's brilliant. As Jung puts it, the complexes behaves like an animated foreign body, and it cannot be argued away because it's alive. It's like those memories that pop up from your past that are, you go through an embarrassing moment and, or you didn't stand up for yourself when you were 14, and that plays itself out. It's so interesting because if you don't harness that assertive side, and a lot of people don't because they think that side should be avoided. Why do people think that side should be avoided? Well, because they were abused when they were young, and the person that abused them were aggressive. So now they associated that assertiveness as something negative. But assertiveness it's double-sided, like good and evil, like anything in the world. You have to reincorporate, or maybe you have to just incorporate it because it's not even there at all. And you have to build on that side of yourself. And I've done that with my clients as well. Build on that assertiveness side, because that's something I worked on myself. I had to build on that because people would walk on me all the time. I am agreeable in temperament. And so it's easy for me to be a yes man. And it took a lot of work for me to say no and mean it and have coherent arguments to why I say no. And so that complex lurking within you, the mind is pulled towards it. Like Jung was saying, it's pulled towards it. And it's the mind's only way of healing from it. But it's very, very unpleasant to encounter. This is the age-old story of the hero venturing out into the woods, venturing away from the Shire, venturing away from their house. And what's so interesting about the adventure story is that when the hero later returns to the home, they're expecting comfort, they're expecting things to be as they were, but it's never the case. I remember in The Hobbit, Bilbo comes back after his grand adventure and his house is being invaded by all the other hobbits taking his stuff. He expects everything to be where he left it, but it's never the case. What does this mean symbolically? It means, well, you can't return to the same place after you go out into the world and encounter malevolence and you encounter tragedy and you overcome that. You're not the same person anymore. So your perceptions of the world are completely different. So because a lot of people want to shrink back into their comfort. Once their eyes are opened, the snake presents them with the apple and they take the bite and their eyes are open. You can't go back to unconsciousness after that. A lot of people want to go back to how things were. Oh yeah, I wish I was that person I used to be, just hanging around, having a couple beers, smoking weed, and being this flamboyant, happy-go-lucky person. Now in life, you're awake to your own mortality because, well, you're not taking care of your health probably, or, you're getting yourself into some trouble. And now the reality, the truth of the matter opened your eyes. And so you can't shrink back into unconsciousness. Quite the contrary, you have to now develop yourself in a different way. The awakening is God's way, I'd say, of telling you, well, look, you have to let these things go that was in that process of awakening you. So the weed and alcohol and the bad friends and the bad job or the messy home and all of these things that make up your life. It's like, hey, look, man, in order for you to fix the problem of the pain you're in now, well, there's all of these things. And the person questions that, right? When the rug gets pulled out from under you, what happens? Freeze, emotion, imagine. The person questions their past, their present, and future simultaneously. And, well, they're in the unknown at that point. And so they're not the person they thought they were. They don't know where they're going in life. And so they have to examine how they wound up to this point of suffering. And that's not a fun experience, because what if you've been doing things wrong for decades of your life? that is so terrifying. And it was terrifying for me when I was awakened, when I was suffering from anxiety in my later 20s. It was a horrifying experience because I started to listen to my mentors online, and they were telling me, this is how you breathe, this is how you do a routine, this is your posture, this is the things that you should avoid saying in public. These are the habits that you should adopt. These habits produce these negative effects. And all of this information hit me like a freight train because I was doing all of these bad habits. My posture was terrible. I was complaining and moaning about my circumstances and my suffering to other people around me. I was this victimizer person. And well, I had to let that go. And it was not a fun day. It was not a happy day at all. And so the trauma is what's outside of our understanding. Trauma is outside of what we know. So we have to look towards what we just don't understand. Like, how did that person betray me? Why did I say the things that I said? Why did I cheat on that person? Why did I lie? Why did I steal? It shocks people. PTSD is doing something that you just can't believe that you did. There's this moral. Well, what's so interesting about that is when people do something that they convince themselves to do it. I convinced myself to cheat. And then once I did, I realized I wasn't the same person after that, because my conscience, you can say, my conscience was like, who are you? Who are you? Like, what I thought to be right was completely wrong. And how I knew that was, well, I was suffering so much more after that. I was suffering like mad. In this amazing book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel Kolk, he says, in order to regain control over yourself, you need to revisit the trauma. Sooner or later, you need to confront what has happened to you, but only after you feel safe and not be re-traumatized by it. The first order of business is to find ways to cope with feeling overwhelmed by the sensations and emotion associated with the past. So this week, I posted a new Meditation Monday. I posted a great exercise you can do to revisit a highly emotional moment from your past. And I recommend that you do something not huge, not the biggest dragon that lurking within your unconscious mind, but one of the more minor moments that you've had, an embarrassing moment, and do that and work your way up to the bigger dragon. Or if you want to dive into the biggest dragon, just be warned that you don't want to be re-traumatized. You don't want to be re-traumatized. You want to set yourself up for success. So go for the baby dragons, build up your competence and tolerance, and then work your way up to the bigger dragon. And what your unconscious is doing by, revisiting the trauma is learning how to not wind up in that situation again in the future. So, being taken advantage of means examining why you were so naive and how to prevent this the next time. It means to be more awake and responsive, harnessing the assertive side of your psyche, the side that's underdeveloped. You have to work on this side. Jung would refer this part of our side that we just don't want to face to be the shadow side. In Harry Potter, Harry talks to his godfather, Sirius Black, and he's distraught. He's having nightmares about being this snake, hurting people, the snake of Voldemort. And Sirius says something utterly profound. He says, it's the actions that matter. And it's you have the thought, but it's choosing not to act on it. It's amazing. That's the shadow side. And how does one harness, how does one heal from thoughts so disturbing? And I'd say, well, explore it. Look into it. And look into what the shadow even means. The shadow is the dark side. The shadow is understanding if you entertain certain ideas long enough, you can wind up in a very bad place. Like Nazi Germany. How does Germany wind up to be, well, what it was? One step at a time. It was co-created by Hitler and the Nazis. And in the public. It was co-created. So it's one step at a time. I want to read you a passage from The Body Keeps the Score, because there's another great point about working through trauma. Like I said at the beginning, as Jung pointed, looking inwards to oneself. The fundamental issue in resolving traumatic stress is to restore the proper balance between the rational and emotional brains so that you can feel in charge of how you respond and how you conduct your life. When we're triggered into states of hyper and hypo arousal, we are pushed outside our window of tolerance, the range of optimal functioning. We become reactive and disorganized. Our filters stop working. Sounds and lights bother us. Unwanted images from the past intrude our minds, and we panic or fly into rages. If we're shut down, we feel numb in body and mind. Our thinking becomes sluggish, and we have trouble getting out of our chairs. As long as people are either hyper aroused or shut down, they cannot learn from experience. Even if they manage to stay in control, they become so uptight. Alcoholics Anonymous calls this white knuckle sobriety, that they are inflexible, stubborn, and depressed. Recovery from trauma involves the restoration of executive functioning and, with it, self-confidence and the capacity for playfulness and creativity. If we want to change post-traumatic reactions, we have to access the emotional brain and do limbic system therapy, repairing faulty alarm systems and restoring the emotional brain to its ordinary job of being a quiet background presence that takes care of the housekeeping of the body, ensuring that you eat, sleep, connect with intimate partners, protect your children, and defend against danger. The neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux and his colleagues have shown that the only way we can consciously access the emotional brain is through self-awareness, i.e., by activating the medial prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that notices what is going on inside us and thus allows us to feel what we are feeling. Most of our conscious brain is dedicated to focusing on the outside world, getting along with others and making plans for the future. However, that does not help us manage ourselves. Neuroscience research shows that the only way we can change the way we feel is by becoming aware of our inner experience and learning to befriend what is going on inside ourselves. And that's where I'm going to leave you on this podcast episode. Thank you, everyone, for being here, listening today. I really appreciate it. In the future, I'm going to do more videos. I know on my channel on YouTube, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, thank you. And leave your comments below. I really appreciate it. If you're on YouTube, I'm going to post more videos in the near future. So if you haven't subscribed, go over to the YouTube channel, The Anxiety Project, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone. And remember, rise above anxiety. I'll see you next time.
Brad's powerful anxiety recovery program is now available at unpluganxiety.com. The Anxiety Project program is downloadable and puts the power of anxiety recovery in your own hands. Visit unpluganxiety.com for more details. Recovery starts now.